If you're looking to give your digital photographs a film look, then you're going to enjoy this video because I'm going to be reviewing a product that is quick and easy to use and gives you amazing results. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be a fun one because I'm going to show you a product that takes me right back to my photography roots. So I started off in photography in the 80s shooting film, and if any of you have ever shot on film, you'll know that film photography has a very different look to digital photography. It's difficult to point to just one thing that makes film look different to digital, but that's probably because of a number of imperfections in film that end up giving it a certain look and feel. And with digital cameras, the idea was that we could overcome these imperfections to get the cleanest, sharpest, and most color accurate image possible. And to a large degree, I think that we can say that most modern cameras are very close to being perfect in the way that they can capture an image. And in most cases, this is because they have largely removed all of the imperfections that were present in film. But by removing these imperfections, I think we've also removed something else that can result in images looking a little bit too perfect and a little too sterile. This is one of the reasons why my editing style has always leaned a little towards making my images look a little filmic by doing things like reducing the sharpness, or using a black mist filter to create glows and lowering the contrast. But those edits are mostly based around a stylized look, which is why I'm really excited to show you the Dehancer photo plugin from Dehancer, which allows you to create a true representation of what a specific film stock would look like. So you can take a digital photograph and see how it would have looked had you actually shot that using film. And at the time of me making this video, they've got 62 different film types, which is awesome. So the people at Dehancer were kind enough to send me a copy for me to review. And I did check with them to make sure that they were okay with me being completely honest when reviewing this product. So the good, the bad, and the ugly. And they said that they use feedback from people like myself to improve the product, which is a great thing to hear. Now, if you want to play around with the product yourself, just to give it a go, they do make a trial version, and I'll put a link in the description where you can get that. But if you decide that you want to purchase a full version for yourself, then later in the video, I'm going to show you how you can get a discount on their website. So make sure that you stick around for that. Okay, let me show you how it works. Okay, so here we are inside of Lightroom, and a point that I wanted to make was that although I am showing you the Lightroom version, you can get versions for Photoshop, Capture One, and Affinity Photo as well, which is great. And it doesn't matter which version you're using, and even if you're on a Mac or on a PC, they're all going to look exactly the same and they're going to perform exactly the same way. Now, I've got a selection of random images here. I wanted to get some with people in it, and I've also got some contrast type images, some very high contrast. I've got some holiday type shots, some portraits, some sort of landscapey type shots. I wanted to get a variation so that you can see how the plugin behaves for different types of photographs. And I'll do a whole bunch of before and after shots later on in the video so you can get an idea of what that looks like. So before you use the plugin, you need to prepare the image so that the plugin can work at its best. And essentially what you need to do is flatten the image with reducing the amount of contrast on the photograph. Now, Dehancer give you some recommendations on what the settings that you should apply depending on what editing program you're using. Now, I've played around with their recommendations, and I've experimented and I've come up with a set of numbers that work for my style of photography. And that is that I bring the contrast down to a -60, okay? And then I also put the blacks up to 40, all right? So that what you end up with is essentially a very, very low contrast image. Now, the other thing that you need to ensure is that the bulk of the information is in the center of your histogram. So as you can see in this one here, it's a little bit overexposed. There's more information to the right. So what I'm going to do is just bring the exposure down a little bit. Okay. And just to ensure that most of it is in the middle and I don't have any clipping either in the highlights or in the shadows. So that image now is ready to begin to be used inside of Dehancer.
Okay, now that we've prepared the image, we're going to engage Dehancer, and we're going to do that by right mouse clicking on the image, go to Edit In, and then select Edit in Dehancer Lightroom plugin. That's going to bring the import dialog box. Now what you want to do is you want to make sure that the settings are the same that I've got on my screen here. Otherwise, if you're working in mixed color spaces or bit depths, then you're going to get some inconsistent results. So make sure that your settings are like what you see on my screen here. And then we're going to click on Edit. That engages Dehancer, so we're going to make this nice and big. And this is what the plugin looks like. So let's have a look around the interface. We've got a selection of previews here on the left hand side. So we've got two sets of previews. We have the profile, and the profile is where you're going to get the list of all the films that are supported inside of Dehancer. As you can see, we've got a number of different preview thumbnails on the left hand side, so you can navigate through that. Or you can go through the drop-down menu, which lists the names of the photographs of the film, beg your pardon. Then at the top, because there are a lot of films in there, okay, at the moment there's 63 at the time of me making this video. What you can do is you can also group them into categories. So for example, color negative films, if you click on that, it will only give you those sort of films that correspond to color negative. Otherwise, you can do say color positive, and there's 8 of those and so forth. But let's just go to the all films so that we can see all of them. And as you can see, there is a massive selection. Then up at the top, you've got also this button here, which is the presets. And the difference between a profile and a preset is that the profile will display all the different films that come already configured to be realistic as if shot on film. And then because you can tweak them and you can make changes to them, you can then go and save them and create a preset out of that. So this is where all those presets are contained, and the way that you add them into here is once you make a changes, you just click on this little plus sign up here, and this will add it then to the list that you can see down here. And Dehancer do provide you some extra presets, which are film simulations, but with some tweaks made to them, okay, to provide just different effects and different looks. Then up at the top, next to the profiles and preset button, you've got this little button which will show and hide the previews. So that just gives you a bit more room on your screen. And then you've got your settings. Now the settings themselves, they're quite simple. The options in here. There are a couple of important things. First of all, the update film profile. This is very important. So every once in a while, quite regularly, you should click on that button. And what that's going to do is going to check the server back at Dehancer for any updates that have been made to the profiles, as well as any additional profiles that may have been added, and it will automatically update your installation. The other thing is that if you've got a machine that a computer that is not it's not new, or maybe it's running a little bit slow, what you can do is you can try and play with this number here. So you can lower this down to say the 5 megapixel version. This corresponds to the preview that you see on the screen, the image preview. So you can bring this down to 5 megapixels, and that should increase the performance of your computer. So let's just close this and have a look at some of the other things that we've got up here. We've got this one button which will restore the last used settings, and then we've got another button that will reset everything to defaults. We've also got an undo and a redo button. And then on the right hand side, we've got a few more things. We've got this little icon here, which this will hide and display the histogram at the bottom of the image that you can see here. It's a nice big histogram, which I really like. So if you click on that, it will hide that and make the image a little bit bigger as well. So if you're after a little bit more real estate because you're working on, say, a laptop, a smaller screen, this is something that might be useful. Next, we have the one-on-one, which is the zooming in at 100%. And then you could just navigate your photograph by clicking and dragging. And you can also do that by double clicking on the image as well. So if you double click on the image, it will zoom in and zoom out. Lastly, what we have is the preview button, and what this does is it will remove any effects that Dehancer has applied and go back to your original image. So if I click on that, that's my original image, and then that will apply the settings that I've applied again. Then you've got your cancel and OK. These are pretty self-explanatory. OK will save a copy of the TIFF file. It saves images in a TIFF format with all the effects baked into the actual image itself. Okay, so and if you cancel, obviously it will not do that. Then on the right hand side is where you've got all the really interesting stuff. These are all the different settings that you can change on for your photograph, and a lot of these are going to relate back to the type of relate to the processes that were involved in printing film and developing film. So some of these sliders you may not be familiar with because you may not have seen this before, because it doesn't apply to digital photography. But because what we're doing is simulating the film process, we now have some of these things which are really, really interesting. Now, I'm not going to go through every single setting in here because, as you can see from the list, it's quite extensive and there's a lot of stuff here that you can fiddle around with. But I'm going to show you some of the main ones that I think are really, really interesting. Okay, so now that we've had a look at the interface, let's have a look at some of the films that are included with the plugin. We've got a great selection here. As you can see, there is loads and loads of different films. And one of the things that I wanted to point out is that most of these films are photography films, but in some cases, what Dehancer has done is also included some motion picture films. So these are stock that was used in cinema back in the day and still is in some cases. So you can also apply some of those films on your images. But let's go back to the old all of the films in here, and you can see that some of the really popular ones like Act for Color are included. You've also got a whole bunch of the Fuji. You've got the Provia, which is something that I used to shoot a lot back in the 80s and in the 90s, and also the Velvia. Very, very good films. And again, on the right-hand side, you've got all these settings that you can go in and fine-tune the look of your image. So at the moment, I've got the film grain disabled. Okay, so if I'm enabling that, then you'll also have the grain also over the top of the image. So let's just switch it off for a second so we can just concentrate on the actual look of the colors and the different effects that you're getting with all the different films. As you can see, some of them are warmer, like this one here, for example, and some of them are much cooler. So if you think back to the film days, there was no way to change your white balance. The way that you changed your white balance was you picked out your film which had either a lower Kelvin setting or a higher Kelvin value, and you would just pick the appropriate film for the scene and the lighting that you were going to be shooting in. We've also got some really good black and white films in here, which do a great job at converting to black and white. Conversion to black and white is not as easy and as simple as most people make it out to be. Most people think that you just slide the saturation slider all the way to the left and get rid of all the color. That is not a proper black and white conversion. It's a little bit more complicated than that, and we don't have the time to go into it now, but I can tell you right now that this does a really good job at simulating the look of black and white films as well. So we've got a great selection in there, and also the presets that Dehancer give you are also really good quality presets, and it gives you a sort of an idea of the kind of results that you can achieve by experimenting. So you can see things like this, which are really, really vivid, and they can be right extreme. Okay, so let's turn on the. We've got the film grain in here, so you can see in here when you zoom in, just how different this looks. In fact, let's do that, and let's compare it back to the original photograph. That's the original photograph, and that's it with the with the simulation applied. Let's look at it in full screen. So original, and then you've got the film simulation. So as you can see, it's really, really powerful. And what we're going to look at now is some of the settings on the right-hand side that allows us to go in and fine-tune the look that we're after. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the more interesting settings that you can change inside of Dehancer. And we're going to start off with this one here, which is the push-pull EV. So this is related to underexposing and overexposing a photograph. And in the digital world, it's pretty straightforward. When you overexpose something, it just becomes brighter. And when you underexpose something, it becomes darker. And so it's pretty simple. Film doesn't work that way, and it's way more unpredictable. So you could have all sorts of different effects, like change the white balance, change the colors, all sorts of things can happen, and it depends on the film. So there's no one film that responds exactly like all of them. They're all going to be different. So let me illustrate this for you. Let's just pick this film here, which is the Agfa Color XRS. And when you are exposing on film, there are several stages where you can expose and underexpose. First of all, when you take the photograph, then second of all, when you are developing the film, you can also overexpose and underexpose at the development stage when you're making the negative. Okay, so it means leaving it longer in the chemicals or leaving it for a smaller amount of time. And then also when you are printing onto paper. So there's different stages where overexposing and underexposing can take place. And so this is trying to simulate that process here according to the different to the film. Let me illustrate this for you. I'm going to underexpose this photograph, and then you can see the changes will happen on the preview here. As I go down, you can see that the colors have completely changed. And not only the colors, but the white balance, it's much, much warmer now. Let me reset this and I'll show you. Okay, you can see that it's not only a little bit darker, a little bit more contrast, but this film is affected when you underexpose it, and it changes the white balance. It's way, way warmer, okay? Now, what happens if I overexpose? Not much. There's still a little bit of a change. You can see the histogram changing. And in some cases, it does add a little bit more contrast, but it retains the white balance a lot better than when you underexpose it. So this film, you could overexpose and be confident that you're still going to get a really good image. But if you underexpose it, then it's going to start looking a little bit warmer and more yellow. So that is a really interesting feature that they've added, because this really simulates the look and the feel of film. And it allows you to change things that were not previously available with digital photography, but now we have that in this simulation. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the other settings that we can change inside of Dehancer. I've switched to a different photograph here so that we can sort of mix things up a little bit. And we're going to try and match a film that suits this type of shot. Now, not all film types are going to match, and they're not all going to work. And so it's up to you to experiment with the different film types and just see which one you like the best. There's no right or wrong, but typically when I'm shooting or when I'm editing photographs with people in them, I want the skin tones to retain a natural sort of look. So for example, I've got this film here, the ADOX color, and this does not really represent the skin tone as it is in real life. Now, it may be that you like this sort of look, and from a creative purpose, you may decide to go with it. But again, there's no right or wrong. But for myself, I like some of the Kodak portrait films that work really well for these type of shots. So I'm going to scroll down to the Kodak section, and I'm looking for Kodak 160, which is something that I used to shoot a lot of. So Kodak Portrait 160. So we're going to click on that, and as you can see, the skin tones now look a lot more natural. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the settings that we have on the right hand side and see how we can further tune this image to come up with something that we really like. So the source section up at the top. And by the way, you can collapse these sections so that you can work a little bit more organized. So these sliders here should be fairly familiar to you. They work the same way as the Lightroom equivalents of these. They just make things darker and brighter. But we're not going to touch that. I think that the exposure is about right. And so we're going to close that. And the same thing with the film developer. You can add a little bit of contrast if you wanted. In fact, I will add a little bit of contrast because I think it's just a tiny little bit. I think you could use it. And what we're going to do also is do a little bit of color boost. I think we just make this a very dynamic image. So let's bring that up to about there. And that looks about right. Just something quickly regarding gamma correction. A lot of people don't know what that is. Essentially what you're doing is you're shifting the midtones of the photograph towards the dark side or the shadows, or towards the highlights. Okay, so in this photograph, I'm not sure that you're actually going to see much difference. There is a little bit of difference. Hopefully that's visible in the on the YouTube video, but we're not going to touch that for this one. But just to clarify, that's what gamma is. And look, Dehancer do provide a very good user manual that go into each one of these settings and explains to you exactly what it does. So you're not going to get lost if you do decide to purchase this or give it a try. Then you've got film compression and expand. So this is where you set the white and black point, and which relates to essentially sort of like the dynamic range of your photograph. And it's used to mostly flatten or add more contrast to the image. So as you can see, we can move that around there. That's the black point. I'm going to bring that up to about, I'm going to leave it about there actually, at almost at 1. And then the white point, we can move that around there to make it a little bit brighter there. So about there, I think looks about right there. And then something that I'm really excited that they've included, which is the print, the print functionality inside of Dehancer. So when we talk about print in the digital photography, world, we generally are referring to a paper print that you're going to make. Okay. With film, it's a little bit different, because with film, the processes meant that you could go from a film to a paper, or you can also go to a file, as in a file that you can play on a computer, or you could also export it to another negative, another film stock, if you like. So back in the days, cinemas would have film projectors. So if you had your original film stock, where you shot the film, you would need to make a copy. So you may decide that you're going to go from one film stock to another different type of film stock, or the same one. And so there were different options. And that's what it's talking about here when it gives you the options to select different things. So at the moment, we've got this on glossy paper, Kodak glossy paper. But if you wanted to go onto another type of film, you would select this one here. Okay, and you've also got a Fujifilm version of that as well. So you've got different types that you can select. I'm going to stick with the glossy paper because that's what I've been, that I started off my settings with. But you can further fine tune that using these sliders in here. Color head, I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but when you used a enlarger to print from say negative onto paper, sometimes in order to change the look and the mood, the temperature, the color tint of the photograph, you would add filters. You would change the settings of the light, the projector light. So when you're printing, you're projecting, just like a projector, you're projecting the image from the negative onto the paper, and that's how the paper records it. But the light has a lot to do with how the image looks at the end. So you could add blues and yellows, and it was a physical filter that you had, the little wheels on your enlarger, so you can simulate that process in here as well, which is really, really good. Film grain, we've already talked about. We're going to switch this on, and we're going to just do a minimal amount of grain for this, and we're going to Actually, we're going to leave the color up there, and we're going to zoom in, and that looks absolutely beautiful, I think. And so down the bottom, we've also got halation and bloom, which I'm going to talk about in a second, but using a different photograph where I can show you that a little bit better. And then finally at the bottom, we've got vignette, and that just pretty much the same as what you've got inside of Lightroom. So you could add or remove or add or subtract a vignette effect on the photograph itself. I find the tool inside of Lightroom probably a little bit better than this one. So this is not something that I would do in here. I would just switch that off, and I would go take the image back into Lightroom and finish it off in there with the vignette. But now let's switch images and have a look at the bloom and the halation effect inside of Dehancer. Okay, so let's talk about halation and bloom. I've switched to another photograph. It's a lot more contrasty, and this is going to hopefully illustrate the effect a little bit easier. So let's just zoom in to some of these lights that I've got in here. Let's go to this section over here. Now, let me explain to you what bloom is. So bloom has a very similar effect to a mist filter, okay, sometimes called a pro mist filter, where you're introducing a little bit almost of like a foggy sort of look over the top of the image. And what it does is it takes away a little bit of contrast, it softens the image, and it makes it a little bit more sort of organic, and it blends the highlights with the shadows a little bit better. So let me just switch this on and I'll show you, and you'll get to see the effect. So I'm going to turn this on, okay? So at the moment it is on, and you can see that some of the contrast is gone. Let me turn that back off again. You can see that some of the darker areas now remain darker, but this is almost like somebody's put like a bit of a foggy glass over the top of it. And this light that you're seeing, this pollution, light pollution that you're seeing, is initiated from the highlights of the photograph. So it looks at the highlights and it spreads some of that light outwards, okay, like somewhat of a glow. So this is something that a lot of photographers do now to soften up the look of digital to make it look a little bit more organic. In fact, it's quite popular to use mist filters, and I'm one of those people that does have a mist filter on my lenses because it does soften the image overall. So let me have a look at the we'll have a look at the image zoomed out, and you may not be able to see it much in this when it's zoomed out, but that is without the filter, and that is with the bloom. So you can see that the highlight, particularly around the highlights, have a look at this this torch here, this heater. When I switch it off, it goes nice and crisp, almost a little bit too crisp, and then it sort of softens up a little bit. You can see in this area over here in the back as well when I switch it off, and when I switch it on, you can see how the photograph is affected. We've also got this mask mode down the bottom, where when you switch that on, you can also see where in the photograph it's been affected. Okay, so you can see that over here there's quite a bit going on, and when you make your changes, so when you move the sliders to the left or to the right, you will see the changes also appear on the actual mask itself, so you can tell that it's actually working. So if I switch that off, if I switch it off and on, you can see that glowy sort of soft effect. This was very big in the 80s, but it was overdone. So now we just wind it back a little bit, and it's a really nice effect. So now let's have a look. I'm going to switch the bloom off, and we're going to look at halation. And halation is another strange phenomena that occurs with film. Again, I'm going to zoom in to here, and we're going to look at some of the highlight or some of the contrasty areas. So I'm going to switch that on, and it's going to be a similar effect to the bloom effect, except that the light will be red, and it's going to surround the highlight, the highlights of the photograph. So let me just switch that on, and as you can see, you see this red sort of glow that spreads out from the highlights. So you've got a nice bright light here, and you can see this sort of red light. So if I switch it off, you can see that this part of the frame, the window frame, is nice and black. But when I switch this on, it goes to this sort of red, I guess it's a red wash that initiates from the highlighted sections, okay? So you don't see it in here because there's no highlights next to it. So if I switch this off and on, the effect is minimized in there because it's not as close as to the highlights as this part of the frame is. So if I switch it on, you can see that wherever there is contrast, you're going to get this sort of red effect. And this is just one of those things that you just used to happen with film. In fact, when we got this in film, this is considered an imperfection. And so you would try to reduce this as much as you can by reducing the contrast in your image. And it's funny that, sort of things come around, and now we're adding these imperfections into our digital photographs because I think we've gone a little bit too far in the perfection. With our images, the digital images is just a little bit too perfect sometimes, and they can lose a little bit of soul and a little bit of feeling from the photograph itself. It's just a little bit too perfect. So that's the idea behind bringing some of these things back and introducing some of these things that, back in the day, 30 years ago, we were trying to get rid of these things, and now we're trying to put them back into our photographs because we've gone too far, in fact, on the perfection range, and we just want to bring it back a little bit. So that's halation and bloom, and hopefully that makes sense.
So I'm really impressed with this plugin. It runs really fast, it's stable, the interface is really easy to use, and the images that come out of it are just amazing. And one of the things that I didn't tell you earlier was that this is also available for iOS, which is awesome because if you're out shooting with your phone, it means you can shoot with a phone, edit with your phone, and immediately publish up to your social media platforms. And for myself, because I use an R5C, if I'm out with my camera as well, then I can transfer the images from the camera to the phone wirelessly, edit on the phone, and again, immediately publish to my social media platforms. And just because you're using it on an iPhone, it doesn't mean that you're missing out on any of the functionality. It's got an incredible interface, very easy to use, and every function that you find on your desktop is also available on the iOS version. As far as improving the product, there's not really a lot that I can bring up. I think it works really well as it is. But if I was being really picky, one change that I would like to see is that if I double click on an image to zoom in on it, currently it always zooms into the center of the image rather than the spot where I double clicked. It'd be really nice that if you jumped straight to that section rather than me having to zoom into the center of the image and then just pan across to the part of the photograph that I want to have a look at. But other than that, that's been really picky, and other than that, there's not really a lot that I can bring up. Now, I did tell you earlier that I was going to show you how you can get a discount on the product. So if you head over to Dehancer.com and you use the coupon code DanCANTERO, then Dehancer is going to give you a 10% discount, which is awesome. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, please make sure that you leave them in the comment section below. Otherwise, you can reach me through any of the usual social media platforms, and you're going to find all the links in the description. And if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to support me, please don't forget to click the like button, and also consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. I make videos like this to help you with your photography on a weekly basis. So if you don't want to miss out on any of those, click the subscribe button and the notification bell, and that way you'll be notified when I upload a new video. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.